So I thought we'd take a break from basketball, talk a little something different today on the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pit, talk a little football, just, take a break, wait for the ACC tournament game tomorrow, and just kind of mix up the subjects and topics after talking about hoops for the first 2 days of the week, and obviously writing a lot about it on Panther-Lair.com and all that kind of stuff. But I got to be honest, I can't really get hoops off the brain. I don't remember what my anticipation level was for the ACC tournament last year. I can't remember how I looked forward to it or what I thought about it or what I was thinking on Monday or Tuesday of the ACC tournament week last year. But right now, I really can't think about anything else. I really can't get so many different topics and themes and issues and discussion points about this team off my brain. It's all I can really think about. And I think there's probably a lot of reasons for that. But the end result is we're going to talk about it again. And today I want to talk about something that has to do with this year's team, but it has to do with last year's team. And it has to do with the first 4 seasons under Jeff Capel. It's chemistry. It's culture. It's one of the things that maybe we overlook a little bit when we talk about why this team has succeeded the last 2 years. And why they're maybe positioning themselves for a back-to-back NCAA tournament appearances. Let's talk about the locker room. Let's talk about what it was in the first 4 years under Jeff Capel and what it's become. And then let's talk about whatever other basketball topics come to mind over the next 20 minutes or so. Let's get into it here on the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pit on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That's I think it was last week when we did the Blake Hinson Mount Rushmore Morning Pit. I think it was last Wednesday. It might have been last Thursday. I forget exactly. When I opened with the Extreme Sports Talk Hot Take machine. And what I just did there, the opening of this episode of the Morning Pit was like the exact opposite. Because I don't have any, I'm not sitting here with any hot takes. I have some ideas on things I want to talk about, but I'm not sitting here with any hot takes about Pitt basketball and chemistry and culture. I just know I want to talk about it today. And I want to talk about it today because of some things we talked about and heard about yesterday. We'll get into that in a second. Of course, we'll tell you all the things right off the bat. It's the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pit here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That's our YouTube channel where we put all of our Pitt video content, whether it's post-game press conferences or midweek press conferences or interviews, or it's practice highlights from football, or it's these daily Morning Pit videos that we do every day of the week, Monday through Friday, our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night. We're doing that tonight at 8:30 p.m. So mark your calendars for that. We used to be always at 8:30, and then we switched up to 8 o'clock. We're going to go back to 8:30 tonight. So we will be live tonight. We got something fun planned for that, so make sure you tune in. You'll definitely want to watch and comment and question. It'll be a good time. We'll enjoy that one. And then we have our we do post game shows after road games, neutral court games, games away from home. We do post game shows right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So after Pitt's game tomorrow, we will be live right here to talk about it, and that's going to be fun. The game starts around 2:30. Hopefully, we'll be doing the live stream by 5 o'clock to talk about Pitt against the winner of Wake Forest and Notre Dame. That was the game that came out yesterday. Notre Dame beat Georgia Tech. Chalk. It was all chalk through the first day of the ACC tournament. Was it 10, 11, and 12 all won against 13, 14, and 15? And so chalk moves on, and Notre Dame, as the 12, moves on to face number 5 seed Wake Forest. They'll play today. I just had this up. I think it's the 2:30 game. Yeah, 2:30 game today on ESPN will be Notre Dame and Wake Forest. The winner of that game will face Pitt tomorrow at 2:30. So that's going to be an interesting one to watch. I love conference tournament week. I do. I love championship week. I love the conference tournaments. I love that today the ACC has games at noon, 2:30, 7, and 9:30. Can start watching a game, Virginia Tech and Florida State in this case, with your lunch. You can watch the Wake Forest Notre Dame game after lunch, and then tonight you get NC State Syracuse, and then the nightcap Boston College and Clemson. Wouldn't be a shock at all if chalk holds through this round as well. Virginia Tech, Florida State, that's the 8-9 game. We'll see. I'm pretty sure Florida State forces a lot of turnovers. They play pretty well on defense, but they're just not very good offensively. I think Virginia Tech will be able to, even though Florida State's strength is on defense, I think Virginia Tech will be able to win that and advance to face North Carolina on Friday at noon. Tomorrow at noon. Notre Dame, Wake Forest. Wake Forest has been in a slump ever since that nonsense was storming the court against Duke. Notre Dame Notre Dame's a dangerous team. They've got good players. Marcus Burton was the ACC Rookie of the Year, and I think you saw yesterday why he earned those honors. So I could see Notre Dame winning that. I'm going to expect Wake Forest to win, though. Syracuse and NC State. I think NC State, they've got some good players. I don't know what DJ Horne's status is. I don't know if he's going to be back at all this week. And I apologize if I missed where they announced that one way or the other. But without him, that's a big challenge. Particularly when Syracuse, I think, has played pretty well in the second half of the season. So that's going to be a real challenge for NC State. I would imagine Syracuse will win that. And then Clemson and Boston College. Boston College looked great yesterday, but they played Miami, who, finished the regular season as the 14 seed, or 14th in the ACC, entered the ACC tournament as the number 14 seed. There's a consensus is that Louisville is the worst team in the conference, and I tend to agree about that. But for the last 10 games or so, Miami has been the worst team in the conference. They've been plummet awful. And so I'm not going to give Boston College too much credit for winning that game. I'm certainly not going to give them enough credit to say that I expect them to beat Clemson. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if you see chalk here. Virginia Tech advancing to face North Carolina, Wake Forest advancing to face Pitt, Syracuse advancing to face Duke, and Clemson advancing to face Virginia. The one thing I'll say about this Wake Forest Notre Dame game, it would not surprise me at all if Notre Dame wins. I got a text from a friend yesterday. Yeah, it was yesterday morning before the games even started, saying book it right now. Notre Dame is going to be the team that Pitt faces on Thursday. And on one hand, I think that would be a better matchup. We've seen how dangerous this Wake Forest team is. The game at Pitt was a close one. The game at Wake Forest was a blowout that didn't go the Panthers' way. Wake Forest is a different team away from home, though. They're a very dangerous team. I feel like Notre Dame would be a more winnable game for Pitt. They could win against either one of those opponents. They can beat Notre Dame. They could beat Wake Forest. Notre Dame is probably a more winnable game. Wake Forest would be a game that would help net rankings and quad wins and all these things a little bit more. If we still feel like that matters. And there's a part of me that thinks that if Pitt can get to the semifinals, this is what Jim and I said last Wednesday night, right? If Pitt wins on Thursday, our consensus that we settled on was that if Pitt beat NC State on Saturday in the regular season finale, and then won a game on Thursday, whether it was the first game they played in the tournament or the second game, because we didn't know if they'd get the double bye at that point, we said if Pitt can beat NC State on Saturday and win on Thursday, they'll be in. I still tend to believe that. I think even if they beat Notre Dame in the quarterfinals to advance to the semifinals, presumably against North Carolina, that should be enough. You make the semifinals of the ACC tournament. You're the number 4 seed. You have 22 wins at that point. That should get you in. Obviously, if they were to beat North Carolina on Friday to advance to the ACC championship game, that should be a lock. I would think resume-wise, Wake Forest looks better than Notre Dame. But, particularly when you have Wake Forest. Well, I was going to say particularly when you have Wake Forest, positioned sort of on the bubble. I was looking, entering Tuesday, Wake Forest was among the first 4 out. Pitt was among the next 4 out. If Wake Forest were to lose to Notre Dame, I would think that would move Wake Forest below Pitt on the bracketology and all of that and, help Pitt's chances. I think whenever Wake Forest loses, whether they lose to Notre Dame or they lose to Pitt, that's going to help Pitt's chances. But we'll see. We'll certainly be watching that game with interest today at 2:30, just like we'll be watching all of these games to see who Pitt will face in the quarterfinals on Thursday. Yesterday, it was up at the Peterson Event Center. It had a little bit of media availability before the team left for D.C. for the ACC tournament. They left last night or yesterday afternoon, sometime around there. We talked to Jeff Capel. We talked to Blake Hinson. We talked to Ishmael Leggett. And Capel, just because we talked to the head coach. Blake Hinson, I think, obviously is a team leader representative, but also after winning first team All-ACC honors. And then Ishmael Leggett as ACC Sixth Man of the Year. I think they brought him out so we could talk a little bit about that. And as we're talking to Leggett, as we're talking to Capel about Leggett, we're talking to Blake Hinson about Leggett, one topic kept coming up in my mind, and it was a topic of chemistry and culture. And Ishmael Leggett is such an interesting guy to consider in that conversation, particularly after getting sixth man of the year, because this is a guy in Ishmael Leggett who transferred to Pitt from Rhode Island for a very specific purpose. And that purpose was to be a starting guard on a team that was hopefully going back to the NCAA tournament. Ishmael Leggett looked at what Pitt did last year, the success they had with a veteran, backcourt, largely, all made up of transfers. Even though Jamarius Burton was a returning player, he had originally been a transfer. Nelly Cummings, Greg Elliott transferred in. Nike Sabandi had been a transfer. A backcourt made up of transfers led the team to its first NCAA tournament in however many years, 9 years or something like that. And Ishmael Leggett wanted to be part of that because all those guys were gone, right? So you had these four transfer guards, Burton, Cummings, Sabandi, and Elliott, leading the team to an NCAA tournament and then leaving, running out of eligibility and being done, leaving open these spots where, there were some freshman guards in Dior Johnson, but an opportunity for a veteran guard like Leggett to come in and play the role that a Burton played or a Cummings played or an Elliott played or a Sabandi. Well, we'll set that one aside because he ended up in the role that Sabandi was in. So that was what Ishmael Leggett came to Pitt to do, to step into the roles left vacant by one of those guys. And that's what he did for the first 14 games of the season. He started every game. He averaged like 13 points per game. He was a key contributor. He was a big piece, a big part of the team. And then he got hurt and he got banged up and he minutes went down a little bit, ended up missing a game, the Louisville game. When he came back, he played less than 20 minutes in each of the next two games. And while he was gone, while he was out, Jalen Lowe got the start. And it turned out that the coaches kind of liked how that worked. They liked how it looked with Jalen Lowe and Bub Carrington on the court together. And so Jeff Capel decided, I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to stick with Bub and Jalen starting. You're obviously not going to take Blake Hinson out of the starting lineup. Then, Ishmael Leggett's not going to start at center. So it was, really, Zach Austin, you can keep him in the lineup. He's a good defensive player and, keep him in the starting lineup. And so Ishmael Leggett goes to the bench and takes on a reserve role. And this was, I talked yesterday about all the turning points in the season and all the inflection points and all of this kind of thing. I think this was an important point as well, because I talked about it just in terms of Jalen Lowe moving into the starting lineup. But Ishmael Leggett, there were a couple of ways he could have approached that new role. And one way would be a way that, let's be honest, some other Pitt players over the last 6 years, really, let's say over the Jeff Capel's first 4 years, but really we could probably extend it into last season, didn't exactly handle it well when they were moved from a starting role to a reserve role. And the response to those moves, when they didn't handle it well, often had a negative impact on the team. Even if they were good players, they were talented players who could help the team, the way they handled themselves, moving into that reserve role, had a negative impact on the team. And Ishmael Leggett could have gone that way as well. I think you could even look as recently as last year, and you see a guy who was a starter, a presumed starter, expected to be a starter, expected to be a major contributor to the team, gets a little banged up, misses a little time. When he's healthy and ready to go, he might be coming off the bench now because the guy who replaced him when he was hurt ended up playing pretty well and looking pretty promising, maybe giving a different look to the team than what was expected. A little more length, a little more size, a little more rim protection, a little bit of a different player. And when that guy who was expected to be the starter came back and found out he wasn't going to be the starter anymore, found out he was going to be working in a reserve role, he never played again. And I don't want to sit here and say that that was entirely the reason John Hughley left the team, but you read the timeline, starter, hurt, Federico might be the starter now. Hughley never dresses again. Hughley leaves the team. If we're going to put 2 and 2 together on that, I think we would agree that that wasn't the proper way to respond to the situation. And if you look over the course of the first 4 years of Jeff Capel's time at Pitt, I think you can find example after example of players, maybe not, 10 other examples of starters moving into reserve roles and not handling it well, but guys not accepting the roles that would allow them to help the team the most. Of guys, maybe knowing what they could do to help the team the most and just sort of refusing to do it. Of guys wanting to be doing a certain thing and filling a certain role when really they could do a different thing and a different role, and it would help the team more. The team would have more success. And Jeff Capel said something last year about, the guys last year understood they wanted the glory like everybody wants glory, but they understood that the individual glory, the personal glory, would come from the team glory. That if the team succeeds, everybody looks good. And there's this funny thing happening, and I'm writing about this on Panther-Lair.com today as well. There's this funny thing that happens when you hear Jeff Capel talk at various points this year and last year as well. And when he talks about different positive things, these guys really care about each other. They really cheer for each other. They really want each other to do good. There's no jealousy or anything like that. There's so many of those sentences you can sort of add this extra clause on that's like, unlike previous teams. These guys really cheer for each other. They want each other to do well. Unlike previous teams. There's no jealousy. There's none of that here. Unlike previous teams. Because there were culture issues. There were chemistry issues on those first 4 teams. Either guys wanted to be something they weren't, wanted to be something bigger than the team, were more concerned with their own roles and their own success and their own glory than the role that the team needed from them or the success or the glory of the team. And there's a lot of things that go into that, and we're certainly not going to absolve Jeff Capel. He's ultimately responsible for roster management. He put these teams together. We could drill down on each individual recruitment and talk about the various circumstances that affected it. There are some excuses you could make. When he first arrived, he recruited a class really quickly. Xavier Johnson and Trey McGowan and Audis Toney, and he got those guys quickly. He got some of them to reclassify. Everything happened very fast. Maybe you do or don't get a great sense of who those guys are. And then you can fast forward to like the pandemic. You couldn't get guys on campus, so you didn't really and then sometimes you just don't know who guys are. Even you can talk to everybody. He said this yesterday. You can talk to everybody around a player or everybody around a recruit, their high school coach and their AAU coach and their guidance counselor and family and all this stuff, and you still won't really get a sense of who they are until you're around them all the time. And there was probably some element of that as well. But there were chemistry issues on those first 4 teams. Those teams had talented players. Okay, they weren't completely bereft of talent. Xavier Johnson was a good player. Is a good player. Trey McGowan's a good player. Audis Toney's a good player. Justin Champagne's a great player. And John Hughley was a really good player. There were good players on those teams. But somehow they found a way to crater every year. Every year. I mean, those teams averaged about 12 wins per year. Including one that won like 10 games, one that won 12 games. They cratered every single year. And when you look at why, I don't think it was a talent issue. I think it's about the chemistry. It's about the culture. It's about how those guys fit together in the locker room or didn't. And when you look at what changed last year, yeah, I mean, they had some really good three-point shooters last year. They had a lot of veteran leadership, veteran backcourt, senior guards, and guys who had come from winning programs and winning situations. I mean, they had a lot of that. And those things are very important. Those things are the most important. But they also had a certain tone. There was a tone set for that team by Jamarius Burton, by Nelly Cummings, by Greg Elliott, by Nike Sabandi. And Nike Sabandi is a great example of a guy who missed a whole year due to an ACL injury the season before last, came back, and ended up working off the bench and won the ACC Sixth Man of the Year award, just like Ishmael Leggett did this year. And there was some transition for Nike where he had to understand that that was the role where he could help the team best. But he could have pouted about it and been a distraction and a challenge about it for the whole season. Or he could say, all right, this is how I can help the team. And that ended up being how he could help the team. And with the team's success came the individual success. He ends up being Sixth Man of the Year. I think that was a huge lesson that Jeff Capel can use when he talks to guys. If he has another conversation with a guy like Ishmael Leggett and says, look, we need you to move from the starting lineup to the bench. Here's why, and here's what you can do. And you're still going to be valuable to us. You're still going to play a huge role, but we need you to do this for the team. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I don't know how those conversations would have gone. Because you had guys who were not being asked to start, and they were still being distractions and causing trouble and not doing things in the best interest of the team. Last year and this year, a tone has been set, a culture has been established, and there really is a commitment to the team. And it's not like this is a team of like no names and, well, it's easy to do that when you don't have any star players. I mean, they have more so this year than last year. They have star players. And it would be very easy for a freshman guard to say, no, I need to be the man. I am the man. I need to be the man. I'm going to go out and make big plays. I'm going to do this all myself. Because guess what? We saw that 6 years ago. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. But what has worked and what does work, and it worked last year and it worked this year, is a group of guys all committed to a common cause. Even Blake Hinson, who takes wild shots, shoots from all over the place, takes contested shots that if other players were taking them, you would say, this guy's trying to be a glory hog. This guy's just trying to do everything himself. But I think we've all come to understand how Blake Hinson fits into that chemistry and that culture. And it was something that was established by Jamarius Burton and Nelly Cummings last year. And I think Hinson has carried that on. And I think Bub Carrington and Jalen Lowe have fit into it really, really well. Why did things turn around after year 4 for Jeff Capel? Part of it was the roster that he put together, the caliber of players, the talent of the players, but that culture that he established, that culture that the players established. Somebody put on the message board that one of the TV guys said after the Miami game, the player-driven teams have success. And I didn't hear that. I can't say who actually said it or what context they said it in, but I think that's pretty relevant here because this is a player-driven team. And last year was a player-driven team. And to some extent, the first 4 teams were player-driven as well. They just weren't all driving in the same direction. Last year's team, this year's team, they're all driving in the same direction. They're all working toward the same goal. And they've come to understand from the youngest guys to the oldest guys that if the team succeeds, the players will succeed. And so Ishmael Leggett, he might have had some reservations about moving to the bench, but I think he's found out it was the right move for him and it was the right move for the team. And what was best for the team ultimately turned out best for Ishmael Leggett. So you give Jeff Capel a little grief for how he managed the roster and how he put the team together in those first 4 years, but give him some credit for what he's done the last 2 years and the teams he has put together the last 2 years. And if you can keep Bub Carrington and Jalen Lowe and Ishmael Leggett here into next season, now you've got guys who can create that linkage and set that tone for next year and really build something. I mean, something's already being built and has been built, but continue building something, a foundation for success. And I think that's a big part of it. I think it's a big part of it. Like I said, I'm thinking a lot of basketball. Maybe we'll talk a little football tomorrow, but probably not. We're going to talk about basketball again. We're going to talk to get ready for that ACC tournament game. This is a great time of year. It really is. It's the best time of year. I love it. I love the conference championship games. Can't wait for the NCAA tournament. It's fantastic. It's good stuff. Good stuff. If you like this time of year, do me a favor and like this video. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com is the site. You should subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. That way you won't miss any of our Pitt video content. Remember, 8:30 tonight, we will be live for the Panther-Lair show talking about the ACC tournament game. And we got some fun stuff planned, so hopefully you can tune in for that. I think it's going to be a good time. We're going to try and get some special guests in to talk about some things, and I think we'll have fun with that. So tune in tonight, 8:30 p.m. right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks for watching the video today. Make sure you check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, to get all the Pitt sports coverage. Have a great Wednesday. Count down the hours till 2:30 tomorrow. In the meantime, watch the games today. Find out who Pitt's going to play. And then count down the hours till 2:30 tomorrow. In the meantime, have a great Wednesday. We'll talk to you tomorrow on the Morning Pit right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.